August 4th, 1941, Bethpage, Long Island, New York. Chief Engineer Robert Hall sat in the pilot's seat as the prototype lumbered down the runway, its barrel-shaped fuselage looking almost too heavy for a single engine to lift. The XTB-1 prototype lifted skyward, and in that moment, critics in the Navy shook their heads. It was the biggest single-engine aircraft they had ever seen. Too complicated, too heavy, too ambitious. None of them could know that this awkward-looking bird, dismissed by doubters as an engineering disaster waiting to happen, would go on to sink more enemy warships than any other American aircraft in history. The rules of naval warfare were about to be changed, not through perfect design, but through sheer, devastating effectiveness wrapped in an overly complicated package that somehow worked better than anything else in the sky. The journey to this moment started in March 1939, when the United States Navy issued a requirement that would challenge every aircraft maker in America. The Douglas TBD Devastator, introduced in 1937, was already old and out of date. The Navy needed a new plane, and they needed it fast. The requirements seemed almost impossible. A top speed of 300 men at a sermon, a range of 1,000 miles, a crew of 3, all bombs carried inside a bomb bay, armor to protect the crew, self-sealing fuel tanks, and most difficult of all, an electrically powered turret on top, a feature that had defeated every previous attempt. 13 companies sent proposals. The competition quickly narrowed to 2 finalists. VA Aviation offered the XTBU-1, a sleek and elegant design that first got praise from Navy testers. Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation offered the XTBF-1, a design that looked like someone had taken their successful F-4F Wildcat fighter and blown it up to huge, awkward size. The VA design was prettier. The Grumman design was more complicated. VA got the first contract, but they were already buried in orders for their F-4U Corsair fighter. They could not possibly deliver torpedo bombers in the time the Navy needed. The contract was transferred to Grumman, and Leroy Grumman's team faced an impossible deadline to build an impossible aircraft. Robert Hall, the engineer on the front lines, stared at the huge list of requirements. Everything the Navy wanted added weight, complexity, and systems that had never been successfully put together in a carrier aircraft. The internal bomb bay alone was a nightmare. It had to be big enough to hold either a 22.4-inch Mark 13 torpedo weighing 2,000 pounds, or 4 500-pound bombs, or depth charges, or mines. The bay doors needed to work reliably in salt spray, during high-G maneuvers, and even if the plane was damaged in combat. The powered turret created even bigger problems. Earlier attempts at rear turrets had failed because hydraulic and manual systems were too slow, unreliable, and too easily damaged in battle. Grumman chose an electrically powered turret, risking the whole design on technology that had never been proven in combat. If the electrical system failed, the rear gunner would be completely helpless. The wing-folding system added even more complexity. To fit on carrier elevators and inside hangar decks, the wings had to fold. But the Avenger's wings were the largest of any Navy aircraft, 54 feet fully extended. Leroy Grumman himself solved this problem during a design meeting. Using a pink eraser as the fuselage and paper clips as the wings, he created what became the stow wing, a folding system with a special angle that let the huge wings fold back and up at the same time, cutting the wingspan to just 18 feet. The mechanism needed hydraulic systems, locking pins, and extra reinforcements that added hundreds of pounds. The Wright R2600 engine, a twin-row 14-cylinder radial producing 1,700 horsepower, was the most powerful engine available. But even this beast struggled to lift the loaded aircraft. Empty weight 10,080 pounds, combat loaded weight 15,195 pounds. This made the TBF the heaviest single-engine aircraft in the world. Critics in the Navy called it the pregnant beast. Others called it the turkey. These were not compliments. On December 30th, 1940, the Navy ordered 286 TBF-1 aircraft. more than 7 months before the prototype had even flown. The urgency was clear. War was coming, and the Navy needed torpedo bombers immediately, complications or not. The prototype's first flight on August 1, 1941, showed both promise and problems. The aircraft flew, but it flew like a truck, heavy and slow. Nothing like the nimble fighter's pilots were used to. The controls were soft and mushy. The pilot's visibility was poor. Even with the cockpit high up, the plane demanded constant attention, constant corrections, and constant muscle. But it was stable. It could carry its full load. And the internal systems, all those complicated systems critics said would fail, actually worked. Then came November 28, 1941. The first prototype caught fire during a test flight near Brentwood, New York. Both test pilots, Bob Hall and Gordon Israel, successfully bailed out as flames consumed the aircraft. The prototype crashed and was destroyed. Critics jumped on it. The design was too complicated, too many systems, too many points that could fail. The electrical turret, the folding wings, the huge bomb bay, all of it was too ambitious. Some said the program should be cancelled. Grumman's response was to speed up. The second prototype was almost ready. Testing continued. Modifications were made. Problems were solved through tough, practical engineering. On January 3, 1942, the first production TBF-1 was finished. Less than 5 months after the first prototype crashed, and less than 4 weeks after Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. By early June 1942, more than 100 TBF Avengers had been delivered to the Navy. 6 of these planes were assigned to Torpedo Squadron 8 for testing. The squadron's old Devastators had already been deployed on the carrier Hornet. The 6 Avengers arrived at Pearl Harbor just hours after the carriers left for a crucial battle near a tiny atoll called Midway. Volunteers were called for. 6 crews raised their hands. Many had never flown out of sight of land. All 6 aircraft made it to Midway Island. June 4, 1942, 07:10 hours. 6 brand-new TBF Avengers took off from Midway Island's Henderson Field, part of the first wave of attacks against the Japanese carrier fleet. The aircraft had been in service for exactly 5 months. The crews had almost no combat experience. They were flying the most complicated torpedo bomber ever built, straight into the teeth of the most experienced carrier force in the world. The Japanese Combat Air Patrol attacked them like wolves. Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, flown by veterans of Pearl Harbor, China, and the Dutch East Indies, tore into the slow-moving Avengers. The TBF's defensive weapons, a single .50 caliber machine gun in the top turret and a .30 caliber gun in the bottom position, were not enough against determined fighter attacks. The Avengers were slow. At maximum torpedo attack speed, they could barely reach 130 km/h. The Zeros could fly over 300 km/h. One by one, the Avengers were shot down. Even Albert Kyle Nest's aircraft was hit again and again. 20mm cannon shells ripped through the wings, fuselage, and tail. His turret gunner, aviation machinist's mate 3rd Class J. Darrell Manning, was killed instantly by a cannon shell to the chest. His radioman, aviation radioman 3rd Class Harry Fryer, only 17 years old, was wounded in the head and wrist. The hydraulic system failed. The electrical system sparked and smoked. Ernest's instrument panel was shattered. Blood from his wounded radioman sprayed across the cockpit. But the TBF kept flying. The huge radial engine, despite many hits, kept working. The self-sealing fuel tanks, one of those complex systems critics had doubted, stopped the plane from exploding when bullets pierced the wings. The armor plates, extra weight critics said, would ruin the aircraft's performance, saved Ernest's life when cannon shells hit behind his seat. 5 of the 6 Avengers were shot down. Only Ernest's battered plane made it back to Midway, crash landing on the runway with 1 crew member dead and 2 wounded. Both Ernest and Fryer survived. The young radio man later remembered the moment he realized they might get home. Blood covered the cockpit. The plane barely responding to controls, but still flying. Engineers later examined the surviving aircraft. It had been hit by at least 9 20mm cannon shells and 64 7.7mm machine gun bullets. Nearly every major system was damaged or destroyed. The Battle of Midway was celebrated as a great American victory. The Japanese lost 4 fleet carriers. American dive bombers got most of the glory. The torpedo bombers, both the old Devastators and the new Avengers, suffered terrible losses. But the sacrifice of Torpedo Squadron 8 became legendary. Of the 15 Devastators that took off from Hornet, none came back. 29 men were killed. Only Ensign George Gay survived, floating in the ocean and watching the battle happen above him. The 6 Avengers from Midway lost 5 planes and 9 men. From the whole squadron, only 3 men survived. Ensign Ernest would be awarded the Navy Cross for his actions at Midway, the first of 3 he would earn. During the war, the Avengers suffered 83% casualties at Midway. Critics again said the program should be cancelled. The aircraft was too vulnerable, too complicated. The losses seemed to prove it was a failure. But intelligence officers studying the damaged planes saw something different. Ernest's TBF had taken enough damage to destroy 10 normal aircraft, yet it had flown home with 2 survivors. The electrical turret, even after heavy damage, kept working until the turret gunner was killed. The bomb bay doors worked correctly under fire. The folding wing system did not fail, even after multiple hits to the wings. The right engine ran for 2 hours after being hit many times. The aircraft was not too complicated. It was too strong. Every complex system, every backup, every redundancy had been designed into the TBF for exactly this kind of battle, taking damage and still fighting. The overbuilt, sophisticated Avenger had brought its crew home when no other plane could have survived. Production was sped up. By August 1942, dozens of Avengers were joining fleet squadrons. Torpedo Squadron 8 was reformed with new pilots and new planes. They would go on to earn 2 Presidential Unit citations, becoming one of the most decorated squadrons in naval aviation history. Ensign Ernest rejoined the squadron and fought at Guadalcanal, earning his 2nd Navy Cross. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons on August 24, 1942, gave the first real test of Avenger tactics with experienced crews. 28 TBFs from the carriers Saratoga and Enterprise attacked the Japanese fleet. 13 Avengers from Saratoga's VT-8 and 15 from Enterprise's VT-3 coordinated their attack. They sank the light carrier Ryujo with multiple torpedo hits. 7 Avengers were lost, but the survivors learned important lessons. The aircraft could take huge amounts of damage. The electrical turret could fight multiple enemy fighters at the same time. The internal bomb bay made it easy to change weapons quickly. The long range allowed the plane to strike far farther than older torpedo bombers could reach. November 1942 brought the naval battle of Guadalcanal. Marine Corps and Navy Avengers played the main role in sinking the Japanese battleship Hiei, a 37,000-ton giant that had been damaged in night fighting. The Avengers put torpedoes into the drifting battleship, proving that the complicated aircraft could destroy big ships. But the most remarkable change was happening in the Atlantic Ocean, far from the Pacific battles. German U-boats were winning the tonnage war, sinking Allied merchant ships faster than they could be replaced. The introduction of small escort carriers gave air cover for convoys, but the planes they had were not good enough for hunting submarines. The Avenger, with its large bomb bay, long range, and ability to carry radar, was perfect for the job. The TBF-1D version, equipped with ASB surface search radar, could find surfaced U-boats at night or in bad weather. The large bomb bay could carry depth charges, bombs, acoustic torpedoes, and the top-secret Mark 24 Fido torpedo. Avengers flying from escort carriers began hunting U-boats with deadly skill. The plane that had been made to sink battleships was now hunting submarines. The tactics were simple but smart. Avengers with radar patrolled ahead of convoys, looking for surfaced U-boats. When one was found, the Avenger attacked with depth charges and rockets, forcing the submarine to dive. Once underwater, the U-boat slowed from 18 knots to 8 knots. The Avenger would circle above, dropping sonobuoys to track the submarine while calling destroyers to finish the kill. If the submarine tried to surface and escape, the Avenger would be ready with more depth charges. If it stayed underwater, the destroyers would arrive. From May 1943 to May 1945, Avengers flying from American escort carriers sank or helped sink 35 feet sea-thief water U-boats in the Atlantic. British Avengers, which the Royal Navy called Tarpon and later Avenger, added more. The total number of submarines destroyed reached about 30, when including Pacific operations against Japanese submarines. No other aircraft came close to this record. The advanced radar systems, the large internal bomb bay that could carry many types of weapons, and the long endurance that allowed 8-hour patrols all worked together to make the Avenger the most effective submarine killer of the war. The year 1944 brought the Avenger to its highest level of effectiveness. By then, nearly 10,000 had been built. General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division had taken over most production, making 7,546 TBMs, while Grumman built 2,290 TBFs. The transition was amazing. When Grumman needed to focus on producing the new F-6F Hellcat fighter, they delivered a demonstration TBF to General Motors held together entirely with sheet metal screws. This PK Avenger, named for the Parker Kalin Screw Company, allowed GM engineers to take the plane apart, piece by piece, and redesign it for mass production like an automobile. Leroy Grumman had doubted GM could even build one Avenger. Instead, GM produced more than 3 times as many as Grumman itself. The TBM-3 version, with a stronger R2620 engine producing 1,900 horsepower, began reaching squadrons in mid-1944. The extra power helped carry the weight of new radar equipment, more armor, and extra fuel. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 showed everything the Avenger could do. This fight, later called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, destroyed Japanese carrier aviation. American fighters shot down over 250 Japanese planes in one day. But the real test came after. Admiral Mark Mitcher learned the Japanese carrier fleet was retreating at long range. Over 200 Avengers joined a mission that went past sunset. Mitcher took a huge risk to catch the fleeing enemy. The strike started late in the afternoon, knowing many planes would return in darkness. Avengers from the carrier Bunker Hill sank the light carrier Hiyo, hitting the Japanese ship with torpedoes in bad weather and fading light. 247 Japanese sailors died when Hiyo capsized. Many Avengers ran out of fuel on the way back, ditching in the ocean or crashing on carrier decks in complete darkness. Mitcher ordered every ship in the fleet to turn on lights, breaking all blackout rules to help guide the planes home. 80 pilots and crew were lost, but the mission proved the Avenger could fly in conditions that would stop other bombers. The long range, the reliable engines, and the strong airframe all made missions possible that should have been impossible. October 1944 brought the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Over 200,000 people were involved. Japanese forces sent almost their entire remaining fleet in a desperate attempt to destroy the American invasion force at Leyte. The battle stretched across hundreds of miles of ocean and included 4 separate fights over 3 days. About 400 Avengers took part in all parts of the battle. The fight at Samar became one of the most dramatic moments in naval history. 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts faced 4 Japanese battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers. The escort carriers, called Taffy 3, carried Avengers and Wildcats meant for ground support, not fighting big ships. When Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force appeared on the horizon at dawn on October 25th, the Americans were outnumbered and outgunned. Lieutenant Commander Edward Huxtable, commander of Gambier Bay's Composite Squadron 10, led his Avengers in continuous attacks against the huge Japanese ships. The Avengers had no armor-piercing bombs. Many had no torpedoes because they were loaded for ground support missions. They attacked anyway, making repeated runs with whatever weapons they had. Some pilots even made dry runs with no weapons at all, trying to distract Japanese gunners and give the carriers time to escape. The small destroyers charged the Japanese battleships in suicidal torpedo attacks. The Avengers worked with them, attacking from many directions at the same time. Gambier Bay was hit again and again and sank, taking over 100 men with her. But the Americans' fierce defense convinced Admiral Kurita that he was facing fleet carriers with full air groups, not escort carriers. After sinking Gambier Bay and 3 destroyers, Kurita withdrew through San Bernardino Strait, giving up the attack on the invasion fleet. The Avengers of Taffy III had helped stop the most powerful Japanese surface fleet to go to sea since Midway. They had done all of this without the right weapons or special training for such a mission, proving the Avengers' ability to perform under the most desperate conditions. On October 24, 1944, the day before the summer engagement, waves of American aircraft attacked the super battleship Musashi as it tried to pass through the Sibuyan Sea. The Musashi was the largest battleship ever built, displacing over 72,000 tons and armed with 9 18-inch guns protected by armor up to 16 inches thick. Japanese designers had claimed the ship was unsinkable. The attack began at 10:27 in the morning. A total of 259 aircraft launched in 6 waves from 4 American carriers and converged on the huge ship. Avengers scored torpedo hits from multiple directions. The exact number is disputed, with estimates ranging from 10 to 19 torpedoes hitting the ship. One commonly cited figure is 10 hits to port and 9 to starboard, though Japanese sources report 11 total. Each torpedo carried 600 pounds of Torpex explosive, much stronger than standard TNT. Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers added 17 bomb hits. Just after 7:30 in the evening, the Musashi capsized and sank, taking 1,223 crew members with her. The largest battleship ever built had been destroyed by aircraft, and Avengers delivered key blows. 5 months later, on April 7, 1945, Musashi's sister ship, Yamato, went on her final mission. Operation Tengo was a suicide mission, sending the super battleship on a one-way trip to Okinawa with only enough fuel to reach the island. American submarines spotted the task force and reported its position. Admiral Mitcher launched everything he had. A total of 386 aircraft, including nearly 150 Avengers, swarmed the Japanese force. The attack began at 12:37 in the afternoon. The first wave of Avengers attacked from the port side, overwhelming Yamato's anti-aircraft guns. The second wave attacked from starboard. The third wave found the ship listing heavily but still afloat. Torpedo hits kept coming. American sources report at least 11 torpedo hits, though the exact count from different aircraft types is uncertain. Yamato's massive armor, designed to stop battleship shells, could not protect against torpedoes hitting below the waterline. Internal compartments flooded rapidly. The list of accomplishments kept growing. At 2:23 in the afternoon, 2 hours and 46 minutes after the first attack, the Yamato exploded in a huge mushroom cloud visible for 60 miles. Casualties were between 2,500 and 3,100 crew members from a total of about 3,000. The era of the battleship ended with her. The Avengers had destroyed both Yamato-class super battleships. They had also sunk or helped sink 12 carriers, 4 more battleships, 19 cruisers, 25 destroyers, and about 30 submarines. The total enemy tonnage exceeded 1 million tons. No other type of aircraft came close to this record. The complicated torpedo bomber that critics had dismissed in 1941 had become the most effective ship killer in history. But most Avenger missions were not dramatic torpedo attacks. By late 1944, Japanese surface ships rarely left port. The Mark 13 torpedo, even with late war improvements, still had problems, requiring slow, straight attack runs that exposed planes to heavy anti-aircraft fire. Avengers increasingly shifted to normal bombing, skip bombing, and rocket attacks. The large internal bomb bay that could carry a single 2,000-pound torpedo could also carry 2,000 pounds of bombs, rockets, or combinations of weapons. Avengers supported amphibious landings across the Pacific, dropping bombs and firing rockets at Japanese bunkers, artillery, and troop positions. The missions were not glamorous, but they were essential. The plane's versatility went beyond combat. The roomy interior could carry cargo, mail, and personnel. Avengers served as air ambulances, evacuating wounded from island airstrips. They flew reconnaissance missions to map enemy positions. They laid mines in Japanese harbors and coastal waters. They performed search and rescue, finding downed pilots. The advanced design that seemed like a problem in 1941 proved to be the aircraft's greatest strength by 1945. The Avenger could do everything. One Avenger pilot who experienced the aircraft's toughness firsthand was Ensign George Herbert Walker Bush. Born June 12, 1924, Bush joined the Navy on his 18th birthday, June 12, 1942, the day he graduated from Phillips Academy. He became the youngest commissioned naval aviator at the time when he earned his wings. On June 9, 1943, at age 18, Bush was assigned to Torpedo Squadron 51, aboard the carrier San Jacinto. He flew 58 combat missions in Avengers, logging 1,228 flight hours and making 128 carrier landings. He took part in operations against Wake Island, the Marianas, the Bonin Islands, and the Philippines. On September 2, 1944, 19-year-old Bush was flying his TBM Avenger named Barbara after his fiancée from the carrier San Jacinto on a bombing mission against Japanese targets on Chichijima. His crew included Lieutenant Junior Grade William White, the ordnance officer, and radio man second class John Delaney. The target was a radio transmitter complex heavily defended with anti-aircraft guns. Bush's plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire over the target. The engine caught fire and smoke filled the cockpit. Despite the fire, Bush pressed the attack and completed his bomb run, hitting the radio facility. As flames spread through the fuselage, Bush ordered his crew to bail out. He flew the burning plane out to sea, away from the island, to give his crew the best chance of rescue. Bush bailed out at about 2,000 feet. His parachute opened, but he hit his head on the tail stabilizer, leaving the aircraft. He landed in the ocean, bleeding from a forehead wound. When he surfaced, he saw no sign of his two crew members. Neither White nor Delaney survived. Their parachutes failed. Bush inflated his life raft and paddled desperately away from Chichijima. Japanese boats came from the island searching for him. He paddled for hours, growing weaker from his wound and exhaustion. Other American planes circled above, trying to protect him until rescue came. After 4 hours in the water, the submarine USS Finback surfaced nearby, and the crew pulled the exhausted pilot aboard. Bush was the only survivor from his aircraft. For his actions at Chichijima, completing the bomb run despite his plane being on fire, Bush was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He finished his combat tour and then returned to the United States as a flight instructor. After the war, Bush served as a congressman, ambassador to the United Nations, director of the CIA, vice president, and finally the 41st President of the United States. In 2009, the Navy commissioned the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS George H.W. W. Bush, designated CVN-77. In his honor, Bush flew 58 combat missions in Avengers, logging 1,228 flight hours and making 128 carrier landings. He experienced what thousands of other Avenger pilots learned. The aircraft was complicated, demanding, and unforgiving of mistakes. But when battle damage came, when enemy fire hit, and when systems failed, the advanced design kept crews alive. The redundancy, the over-engineering, and the multiple backups all worked together to bring crews home. The statistics tell the story that critics refused to see. Nearly 10,000 Avengers were delivered. Over 46,000 combat sorties were flown. Total combat losses were 729 aircraft. The loss rate, 1.58% per sortie, was among the lowest of any combat plane in the war. Anti-aircraft fire caused 422 losses. Aerial combat caused just 47 losses. Operational accidents, mostly landing accidents on carrier decks, caused 260. The complex systems that critics thought would fail rarely did. The aircraft that was too heavy to fight proved too tough to kill. Comparison with other torpedo bombers shows the Avenger's dominance. The Japanese Nakajima B-5N, which had devastated Pearl Harbor, was already obsolete by 1943, lacking the speed, range, and defensive armor to survive against American fighters. The British Fairey Swordfish, despite its legendary status, was a fabric-covered biplane that survived only because it flew where modern fighters were rare. The American Douglas TBD Devastator was destroyed at Midway. Torpedo Squadron 8 flying Devastators from Hornet lost all 15 planes and 29 crew members in their attack. The Avenger, flying the same mission the same day, brought one plane home with 2 survivors. That battered TBF proved what would become normal: survivability through strong engineering. The Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver, the Navy's dive bomber, had constant mechanical problems during the war. Pilots called it the Beast, and the name was not a compliment. The Helldiver's complexity caused failures. The Avenger's complexity created redundancy. The difference was philosophy. Curtiss tried to make a complex plane that was barely good enough. Grumman made a complex plane that was much better than needed, then made it even tougher. Post-war analysis revealed the deeper truth. The Avenger succeeded not in spite of its complexity, but because of it. Every intricate system served multiple purposes and saved lives. The large bomb bay that added weight and complexity allowed the Avenger to carry torpedoes, bombs, depth charges, mines, radar equipment, acoustic torpedoes, reconnaissance cameras, extra fuel tanks, and cargo. No other aircraft had this flexibility. The electrical turret, which critics said would fail, proved more reliable than hydraulic systems and allowed gunners to track attacking fighters faster. The stow-wing folding mechanism, which added weight and extra parts, let the large plane fit on small escort carriers, increasing the number of ships that could use Avengers. The stow-wing was a triumph of clever engineering. Leroy Grumman designed it during a meeting using simple materials. He used a pink eraser for the fuselage and paper clips for the wings. By testing different angles, he found a pivot point that let the wings fold upward and backward at the same time. The resulting stow wing reduced the 54-foot 2-inch wingspan to about 18 feet when folded. This smart design let the massive Avenger fit on elevators of even the smallest escort carriers. The tough construction that made the aircraft heavy saved many lives. Avengers could take damage that would destroy other planes and still keep flying. Pilots reported returning to carriers with wings full of holes, engines smoking, hydraulics failed, electrical systems shorted, and the aircraft still responding to controls. The strong structure, redundant systems, and even the extra weight all helped bring crews home alive. By the war's end, the Avenger had flown more combat missions than any other Navy torpedo bomber. It sank more enemy ships than any other American aircraft. It destroyed more submarines than any other plane in history. It served in more roles, more battle areas, and more conditions than any other bomber at the time. The aircraft, once called too complicated, had proven to be perfectly built for everything war demanded. The Avenger's service didn't end in 1945. Post-war versions continued flying with the U.S. Navy until 1954, when newer planes finally replaced them in frontline service. The Royal Canadian Navy used Avengers until 1960 for anti-submarine missions in the North Atlantic. The Canadian AS-3 version had a magnetic detection boom sticking out from the back, advanced electronics to track Soviet submarines underwater, and the endurance to patrol the cold North Atlantic for hours. The TBM-3E and its later versions served for a very long time. France used Avengers from the carrier Arromanches in Indochina in the early 1950s. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force used Avengers for anti-submarine patrols into the early 1960s. The Netherlands flew them from their carrier Karel Doorman. Brazil, Uruguay, and other countries found the Avengers' combination of payload, range, and reliability perfect for maritime patrol. The complicated plane, once thought hard to maintain, was actually easy to keep flying, and many countries preferred it over newer, better designs. The TBM-3W version pioneered airborne early warning, carrying the huge AN/APS-20 radar underneath. This flying radar platform could detect enemy planes far beyond the range of ship radars, giving fleet commanders crucial early warning. The TBM-3S focused on anti-submarine warfare, carrying advanced sonar, radar, and acoustic homing torpedoes. These versions were so successful that Avengers stayed in U.S. Navy service for 9 years after the war ended, an exceptional career for a World War II design. The plane's final combat use was in 1951 during the Korean War, but contrary to popular stories, Avengers did not fly the last torpedo attack in history. That record belongs to the Douglas AD Skyraider, the Avengers' successor. On May 1, 1951, 8 AD-4 Skyraiders from Attack Squadron 195 and Composite Squadron 35 5 took off from the carrier Princeton to strike the Huyen Dam in North Korea. The dam controlled water flow to the Pukon River, and North Korean forces were using it strategically, releasing water to flood areas where UN forces were advancing, then stopping the flow to trap them in the riverbed. The Skyraiders carried Mark 13 torpedoes, the same type the Avenger had used in the war. 8 torpedoes were dropped. 7 hit the dam. 6 exploded, making big holes in the concrete and crippling the dam for the rest of the war. This mission was the last time in history that aerial torpedoes were used against a surface target. The era of the torpedo bomber ended at its peak, with planes launching torpedoes against important targets. The Avenger had defined that era, setting standards even its successor, the powerful Skyraider, could not surpass. Modern studies of the Avenger show design choices far ahead of their time. The modular internal bomb bay that could carry different weapons without changes predicted modern multi-role fighters. The heavy use of electrical systems instead of hydraulics pointed to designs used in the jet age. The focus on keeping the crew safe over just performance predicted military aviation thinking for the next 70 years. The way radar, radios, and electronic warfare gear were combined into a single plane created a model for modern naval aviation. William Schwendler, Leroy Grumman, Robert Hall, and the engineering team at Grumman Aircraft didn't just build a complex torpedo bomber. They built the future of naval aviation inside a barrel-shaped fuselage that critics had called ugly. They proved that aircraft could be made survivable with redundancy and strong construction. They showed that versatility was more important than specialization. They proved that crew comfort and ability mattered more than raw performance numbers. The design ideas behind the Avenger influenced U.S. Navy aircraft for decades. Keeping crews alive became a main goal. Multi-role capability shaped future aircraft requirements. Combining advanced electronics and weapons became the standard, still followed today. The Avenger was not only a successful World War II plane, it became a model for building combat aircraft that could survive, adapt, and do many types of missions. The numbers prove it. 12 aircraft carriers sunk or helped sink. 6 battleships, including the 2 largest ever built, 19 cruisers, 25 destroyers, about 30 submarines, over 500 merchant ships, 1 million tons of enemy shipping destroyed, 729 aircraft lost out of nearly 10,000 built, 46,000 combat sorties, 1.58% loss rate, the highest kill ratio of any American plane in World War II, measured as ships sunk per aircraft lost. The designers who made this record never tried to build the most beautiful aircraft. They never tried to build the simplest aircraft. They built the most effective aircraft, and effectiveness needed sophistication. Every system, every backup, every extra ounce of weight helped the mission. Critics who only saw complications missed the reason behind every choice. This plane was not complex just for show. It was sophisticated because war is unpredictable, and survival needs preparation for every situation. The production achievement itself deserves praise. 9,836 Avengers were built in just 3 years. At peak production, factories delivered over 200 planes per month. General Motors, a company that had never built a single airplane before the war, became the main manufacturer using clever production techniques. Turning car factories into aircraft plants in just months showed American industrial power at its peak. The same workers who built Chevrolets now built torpedo bombers, working 3 shifts to meet Navy needs. The Avenger's operational versatility was also amazing. Beyond famous torpedo attacks, Avengers flew more missions dropping bombs than torpedoes. They led night operations using radar to find and strike targets in total darkness. They did combat search and rescue, saving hundreds of downed pilots in the Pacific. They acted as flying ambulances, taking wounded soldiers from island battles. They delivered supplies to isolated units. They photographed enemy positions for intelligence. They patrolled shipping lanes for submarines. They gave close air support to Marine troops. No other single plane did so many different missions successfully. The human cost of Avenger missions, though lower than other torpedo bombers, was still high. About 730 crews were lost in combat, meaning over 2,000 American lives. Many more were wounded. The plane could bring crews home after heavy damage, but it could not make them invincible. The low loss rate meant more crews survived to finish their tours. More pilots returned to train new aviators. More experience was kept and passed on. The engineering choices that focused on survivability directly saved lives. Individual acts of heroism by Avenger crews fill the pages of history. Volumes of Navy history record the brave actions of Avenger crews. Beyond the famous names, thousands of pilots, bombardiers, radiomen, and turret gunners flew into anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighter attacks to deliver their weapons on target. They flew missions in typhoons, in total darkness, at extreme range, under impossible conditions. They pressed attacks against overwhelming defenses. They stayed with damaged planes to bring wounded crew members home instead of bailing out safely themselves. The Avenger gave them a fighting chance. Their courage did the rest. The torpedo bomber is gone now. Modern anti-ship missiles do in minutes what required wings full of torpedo bombers in 1944. No nation operates torpedo bombers anymore. The mission itself has been replaced by technology, but the lessons of the Avenger still matter in engineering and design. Over-engineering for survivability saves lives. Redundancy wins battles. Sophistication, when done for a purpose and done well, creates capability. Versatility often matters more than specialization. The ability to take damage and keep working decides survival. These lessons go far beyond aviation. The Avenger showed that strong construction costs less than replacement. The extra weight of armor, backup systems, and overbuilt structure was paid back many times over in planes that survived to fly again, and crews that lived to fight again. Even though accountants might have preferred lighter, cheaper planes, the combat record proved them wrong. Investing in survivability brought victories and saved lives. The ugliest duckling can become the deadliest hunter, and sometimes the plane everyone says is too complicated is actually smart enough to do what nothing else can do. The Avenger proved this in the hardest test possible. Combat against a determined enemy who had been ready for war while America slept. The plane critics dismissed did what more elegant designs could not. It changed the rules of naval warfare. It set new standards for aircraft survivability. It showed capabilities that influenced military aviation for generations. Today, surviving Avengers fly at air shows, reminding people of what American industry and American airmen accomplished. About 60 Avengers remain worldwide in different conditions. Some are kept flying by organizations and collectors. When a restored Avenger flies overhead, its unique shape and loud engine sound take people back to a time when these unlikely warriors ruled the Pacific skies. The Avenger that took off from Bethpage in August 1941, the ungainly beast critics dismissed, proved them all wrong. It did not do so with elegance or simplicity. It did so with relentless effectiveness, mission after mission, year after year, in every role war demanded. The sophisticated torpedo bomber that should have failed instead changed naval aviation and sank more enemy ships than any other plane in history. In the end, it was not too complicated to fail. It was smart and strong enough to win. And in winning, it brought home more of its crews alive than any other torpedo bomber ever built. That achievement, more than tonnage sunk or battle stars earned, is the true measure of the Avengers' success. The plane kept its promise. It brought them home.